Have you ever met someone who seems perfectly fine being alone? Someone who never talks about missing their friends, their family, or even past relationships. Maybe you're that person yourself. And if you are, you've probably noticed how others look at you with a mix of confusion and concern when you tell them you don't really miss anyone. There's something deeply fascinating about this. We live in a world that tells us constantly that missing people is normal, that longing for others is part of being human. Songs are written about it, movies revolve around it, yet some people genuinely don't experience this feeling. And it's not because they're broken or heartless. There's actually some really interesting psychology behind it. Let me tell you about my friend Sarah. She moved across the country 3 years ago, leaving behind her entire friend group and family. When I asked her if she missed home, she looked at me with genuine confusion and said no. Not in a sad way or a defensive way, she just didn't. Her parents would call and ask when she was coming to visit, and she'd think about it the same way she'd think about any other task on her to-do list. No emotional weight to it at all. For the longest time, people told Sarah something was wrong with her. But here's the thing that most people don't understand. The capacity to miss someone isn't actually a universal human experience in the way we think it is. It's deeply tied to how we form attachments, and that process starts way earlier than most of us realize. When we're babies, we begin developing what psychologists call attachment styles. Think of these as emotional blueprints for how we'll relate to people for the rest of our lives. If you had caregivers who were consistently there for you, who responded to your needs reliably, you probably developed what's called secure attachment. You learned that people are trustworthy and that relationships are safe. But if your caregivers were inconsistent, or if they were emotionally unavailable, something different happens. Your brain, in its infinite wisdom, decides to protect you. It learns that depending on others is risky, so it develops strategies to keep you emotionally safe. One of those strategies is simply not forming the kind of deep attachments that lead to missing people when they're gone. Now, before you start thinking this is all about childhood trauma, let me be clear. Not everyone who doesn't miss people had a difficult childhood. Some people are just wired differently. They process relationships in a more present-focused way. When someone is there, they enjoy them. When they're not, they move on. It's not cold, it's just different. Think about it like this. Some people have minds like photograph albums. Every person they care about gets stored away in detailed images that they revisit constantly. They flip through these mental pages and feel all the feelings associated with those memories. Other people have minds more like flowing rivers. Experiences happen, they're enjoyed, and then they flow past. The river doesn't hold on to the water that passed through yesterday, it just keeps moving. Neither way is better or worse. They're just different ways of experiencing human connection. But our society definitely favors the photograph album people. We celebrate missing people. We see it as proof of love. So when someone doesn't experience that longing, we assume something must be wrong. I remember talking to a therapist about this once, and she said something that really stuck with me. She said that for some people, love exists fully in the present moment. They don't need to miss you to care about you. Their affection isn't measured by how much they suffer in your absence. It's measured by how fully they show up when you're together. That's a completely different framework than what most of us are taught. We're taught that if someone doesn't miss us, they must not care. But what if caring and missing are actually separate things? What if you can deeply value someone without experiencing distress when they're not around? There's also a neuroscience component to this that's pretty interesting. The feeling of missing someone involves specific brain regions associated with reward, memory, and emotional regulation. When you miss someone, your brain is essentially craving the dopamine hit it gets from being around that person. But not everyone's brain forms these same patterns. Some people get their dopamine from different sources. They're more focused on what's in front of them rather than what's absent. This doesn't mean they're incapable of connection. It just means their connection isn't dependent on longing. They connect through presence, through shared experiences in the moment, through practical support. Their love language is different, and that's okay. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. There is a difference between healthy emotional independence and avoidant attachment that's actually causing problems. How do you know which one you're dealing with? This is where things get nuanced. Healthy emotional independence looks like someone who maintains relationships easily, who responds to others warmly, who can be emotionally present when you're with them. They just don't pine away when you're apart. They trust that the relationship exists even when you're not in the same room. They don't need constant reassurance or connection to feel secure. Avoidant attachment, on the other hand, often comes with other red flags. These people might struggle with intimacy altogether. They might keep everyone at arm's length. They might have difficulty being vulnerable or accepting vulnerability from others. They don't just not miss people. They actively avoid getting close enough to anyone that missing them would even be a possibility. The key difference is flexibility. Someone who's healthily independent can still form deep bonds. They can still be there for people. They just don't experience the emotional ache of absence. Someone who's avoidantly attached struggles with closeness itself. I think it's also worth mentioning that not missing people doesn't mean you can't feel grief or loss. Those are different emotional experiences. You can absolutely feel sad when a relationship ends or when someone dies without having spent the relationship constantly missing them during normal separations. Grief is about finality. Missing someone is about temporary absence. They activate different emotional systems. There's something else interesting here too. In our hyper-connected world where we can text anyone at any time, where video calls make distance almost meaningless, the whole concept of missing someone is changing. Some people adapt to this by maintaining constant low-level contact. Others adapt by being perfectly content with intermittent connection. Neither approach is wrong. Think about how our grandparents experienced relationships versus how we do now. When someone moved away, you might not hear from them for months. Letters took weeks. Phone calls were expensive. People had to be okay with long periods of no contact. Maybe some people are just more suited to that older model of relating, even though we live in an age where it's no longer necessary. So what does all this mean practically? If you're someone who doesn't miss people, should you be concerned? Honestly, probably not, unless it's causing problems in your relationships or unless it's paired with other signs of emotional difficulty. If you can form connections, if you can be present with people, if you can care about others and show that care, then you're probably fine. You're just wired differently. And if you love someone who doesn't miss you, try not to take it personally. Their lack of longing isn't a reflection of their feelings for you. They might care about you deeply while also being perfectly content when you're apart. These things can coexist. The beautiful thing about understanding all of this is that it opens up space for different kinds of connection. We don't all have to love the same way. We don't all have to experience relationships through the same emotional lens. Some of us are photograph albums. Some of us are flowing rivers. Some of us are somewhere in between. What matters most is that we're authentic in how we connect, that we find people who understand our style of relating, and that we don't judge ourselves or others for experiencing emotions differently. The person who doesn't miss anyone isn't emotionally stunted. They're just showing us that there are more ways to be human than we previously imagined. At the end of the day, relationships are about so much more than missing each other. They're about mutual respect, shared values, kindness, support, and genuine care. And all of those things can exist whether you spend your time apart counting the minutes until you're together again, or whether you're perfectly content doing your own thing until the next time you meet.